Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Morgan Magid, by the way. I'm the program associate here at the JCC and for the ReelAbilities Film Festival. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for this amazing film. I kind of want to start off kind of with the quick questions, so to speak. So where did you find Diego and this family, and what was this filmmaking process like for you all?
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for staying and for being here. So Chase and I have been making films together for about 10 or 11 years. We met in college in Ohio, and around 5 years ago, we embarked on a project around tourism, which took us to Puerto Vallarta. We were a tourist town in Mexico. We were in development on this project, and we met Diego there at a birthday party, just casually talking about movies, music, art, whatever. And we became friends. We began to film with him some in his work in the hotels and in the tourism industry. But just as one part of a larger project. And as you know, the day came that he had to return to Colima to begin caring for America and living with his brothers. And initially I went to visit him more as just kind of a friend to see how he was doing, what was going on there. We were very close before that ever happened. But once I met America, once I saw the relationship they had, once I got the sense of the project that the brothers were endeavoring on to, become responsible for their grandmother, to try to get their father out of jail, to learn all these new things, it inspired us both immensely. And so we decided to leave the other project behind, dedicate ourselves to following their story. So over the next couple years, I lived with them on and off, filming, and it was something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really began with a friendship. It's not the kind of story that you can go out kind of searching and finding and discovering. It began with our friendship with Diego and his openness to sharing the story of his family with us and the openness of the brothers. And it helped that America really is a star. And, the first time seeing the footage of her, it was so compelling. It really wasn't very difficult to stop working on the other project.
And that's one of the things that I think is so striking about the film is this level of intimacy that you have with everyone there, and kind of the empathy that comes with, I think, being friends with Diego and being like so close with all of your characters and all these subjects in the film. I think that comes across very clearly for everyone that watches the film. Were there times, though, there's obviously a lot of kind of heated moments and, again, like intimate moments in this, were there times where you kind of wanted to shut the camera off, or you felt like maybe you didn't necessarily belong in the room then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was an interesting challenge. I feel like usually you have to persuade people to let you film with them. With Diego and Bruno and Rodrigo, the brothers, they never put up any barriers. They never said, not now, not this, not that. They were very open. And so there was I think something new for us was to really think carefully about when is it appropriate to film, when should we stop. Mm-hmm. But balancing that with the fact that we were there to be witnesses, right, to what they were going through. And so trying to balance that what is in some sense a responsibility to be present, to film, to be a witness, while also trying to, above all things, balance consideration for America, for her privacy, for her wellness. And it was a new challenge for us.
And a challenge in every part of the process, and beyond shooting, even in the editing room.
Yeah,
we had to ask, because you end up with a lot of footage in these situations, and in a 74-minute film, that's a very small representation of years of this family's life. And so choosing how much of what you put and in what way you put it was really, really complicated. And
we still fight about it.
And we still fight about it. We do. We still. I mean, you learn so much watching the film with audiences, also, and hearing back people's response.
Mm-hmm. And so there is that scene in the beginning of the film where Diego and America are sitting on the bed, and they kind of acknowledge your presence and the presence of the camera. So from your understanding, kind of what was her awareness of what was going on,
right,
and with the camera and the film?
I can't obviously totally speculate, but from living with her day to day, it was my general sense that though she had solid memory of the first 50, 60 years or so of her life, that in that house she generally didn't know where she was or who she was with. She always assumed she was with family. She was with people who she knew and cared about her. She wasn't suspicious. She was very trusting of people to come around. And so with regard to that scene, I think, like, in addition to just being a lovely moment, for those of you who are Spanish speakers, her pun with estrella, estrellada is very funny. So it's just a wonderful moment with her. But I think we wanted to foreground, as a matter of transparency, that her capacity to consent to being filmed, to a long-term filming project, is different than the brothers, right? And so it was kind of an ever-renewing thing with her, where every day or every time we'd film, she would ask, who are you? What are you doing? And we'd talk about it. And sometimes she was like, oh, like in that scene, very playful about it and coy and funny. And in other times she would say, like, oh, please leave me alone. And, we would, whenever she asked that, we always step back.
We have this amazing clip of her where she sings a song where she's singing and she says, "Oh, what's going on? We're filming," and she sings a song, and you'll help me here with the words, right? Where she says something like, "Oh, you're filming without consideration if I've got boogers in my nose or my hair is correct." And so she, she was very playful when it came to discovering that she was being filmed each time, which, it's the opposite relationship that people who are being filmed over long periods of time normally have, which is they don't ever, I don't think they ever forget the camera's there, but they're kind of bored or annoyed by it. And so, in that sense, there's always this question of performativity in documentary and how much people are performing. And it's like one can truly say America was not performing for the
Whereas
camera.
maybe Diego and the brother and Bruno and all these people who are circus performers, maybe.
Right.
How much did you feel like, again, like there's such a performative aspect
though,
of the camera?
I mean, they say that they got that their interest in circus and humor, absurdity, comedy. They credit all that to America, right? So perhaps America was putting on a show for us more than we know.
I'll just ask two more questions and I'll turn it over to the audience. Another conversation that in the film that Diego and Ro have is that America kind of has her own reality, and it feels like each of the brothers and Luis and Chris kind of have their own realities about the situation. So how did you kind of weave everyone's own kind of perspective into this film?
I mean, speaking to that scene just briefly, like, in that scene, right, Ro says that he at least initially, that America isn't conscious, right? And I just want to say that wasn't always his position. I think that in a moment of frustration and confrontation with the challenges they were going through, that was one of his ways of rationalizing his desire to be out of that situation. But I think what's so beautiful in that scene is you see Diego's very expansive and infinite idea of consciousness, of who is human, what is humanity, who is included within our circle of humanity. And so to me that scene is like such a key in some way to the film.
And it's interesting because Rodrigo's speaking about how he finds it, he can't communicate with America, but we see throughout the film that
how well
Diego communicates with her so well. And it's true, I think, to your other point, that each of the brothers had a very different relationship and perspective. And, that is the story of the film, is the moment in which each of them kind of came together under with one goal in mind of taking care of her. And then, unfortunately, it's falling apart.
Yeah, as a matter of fairness, we tried to be fair to all of their positions, but Diego was always kind of the seed in the center of the film. So we kind of squeaked by, both trying to root it in Diego's experience, but while allowing, we hope, Rodrigo to be able to make his decision, without too much judgment. Although I think each audience member brings their own judgment of his decision.
And because we're at ReelAbilities, so the film is played across the world at different film festivals of all different kinds. What has it been like to kind of see the film through this disability lens here at ReelAbilities? Because I think we kind of talked about that might not have been something you thought of initially.
I'm hoping that maybe we'll know the answer to that question even better after we get to have a little more of the Q&A and hear what people think. But it's a new framework for us. I think, to some extent, we were thinking a lot about caregiving, care work, care labor while making the film. I think because they're our age peers, we were, at least initially, definitely really empathizing and thinking a lot about what the brothers were doing and going through. And I think it has taken longer for us as we live with the film to really to think more fully about America's experience. And so it's a good question. I feel like I'm not even ready to answer it yet. Chase, what do you think?
Oh, I'm thinking of a conversation you and I have had many times about who is worthy of love and the full kind of grant of humanity that we give everyone, and the fact that in our society we highly value basically people who can contribute to the market, who can make some kind of money or be productive in that sense, and that is why people who, after their retirement years end up struggling so much with the basic material resources to get by, and then ultimately their caregivers do too. And I think that expanding just in general what we think of as people who are utterly and totally and completely without question worthwhile for the full breadth of human experience and respect is something that I do think in the caregiving context is an important one when of course, so much of the conversations end up being about the practicalities of it. It's easy to forget the
and I think we
foundation.
I think we approach some of the questions a little more from like a material perspective of just like, do people have what they need to live well, to have options in their choices? Last night there was a powerful short film by a man contemplating moving to Texas, but realizing that Medicaid didn't cover the 24/7 in-home care that he was receiving in New York and Texas, thereby making him unable to go be with his son in Texas unless he wanted to be to live in a facility to receive that kind of care. And so I think like making this film, talking about this film, hearing other people's stories has really made us realize how, and it didn't have to be this way, right? These are like political and economic decisions, how limited people are to make decisions whether to continue to live independently in the case of old folks or anyone, to make a decision to stop to work so you can care for a loved one. These are all decisions people should be able to make, empowered decisions, right? And we certainly have enough resources and knowledge to extend that to everyone, right? And it's just a matter of politics and economics that we choose not to.
And we've learned more about this in the last year than I think we ever could have imagined, just hearing from people. It seems to be remarkably universal in nearly any country in the world. This is a problem. So.
And that film is Mapping the Disability Trap by Jason De Silva.
Thank you.
And it's actually available on the New York Times in their OpDoc section. So if you want to check that out after, I would recommend it. Yeah, it played at our Shabbat dinner and conversation and films. Okay, so we have a mic coming around if anyone has questions.
Hi, I'm just wondering, has the movie been played at all in Mexico, and what kind of reception it got?
It's
and
been
conversation it brought to the.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, it's on a tour right now in Mexico. Over the last weekend, we were in Guadalajara for several public screenings, and by and large, the reception has been pretty much the same, right?
I'd say that,
right?
Yeah, mostly the same. It's been very warm. People have responded very well. I do think there's one difference, which is that, the brothers are part of a fairly eccentric family, right? And when we screen the film in Europe or we've screened it in the States, oftentimes they're like, well, it's a Mexican family, but we screen it in Mexico, and of course they're like,
what a bunch of weirdos.
What a bunch of weirdos. They recognize them for their eccentricity.
For the particularities. But
sometimes I think the other question of this, they're just cultural misunderstandings that in Mexico they don't have. A lot of times people think that, this is a story of Mexico. In Mexico, everyone must care for their family like this. And of course, that's not true either. This was the story of just one family and not an analysis of caretaking in Mexico State.
Yeah.
And so that's been...
So obviously they don't, they
lack the misunderstandings of Mexican culture.
Mexico. But by and large, we've been very grateful over the last month of showing it to many folks in Mexico that the screening has been that the film's been as appreciated and well received as elsewhere.
It's been very meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
It's a great film because I just think so many of us have gone through with our parents, making decisions and trying to keep them at home or not, and there's political decisions. I was curious the economic piece because it seemed like there was some money coming in from her, for her pension.
Right.
And then the father, I mean, that whole thing of why he was in jail in the first place was ridiculous. But then paying, and then there was some fighting over the money. So I didn't know. And then the father ends up doesn't want to deal with it at all, which he didn't even have the skills for. He didn't seem like he had the emotional interest. So I was just curious anyway how the money played out with that.
Yeah, I mean, money is in some ways. I mean, it's not everything, but it's a lot of
it's
everything,
super-
right? I mean, she received
yeah.
a very small pension from her decades of civil service. She worked in Mexico City for the city for decades and decades. Received a small pension for that, which would have been enough to cover her living expenses, but certainly not those that of whomever who might care for her. Luis was her only son, which is a little unusual. So without his grandchild, and also divorced, so he was alone caring for her while also needing to work. So he was really stretched thin. I think what you say about his emotional capacity to care for may be true. That's outside, I think, our knowledge and the boundaries of the film. I think it may be true, but I think what he really lacked was just like resources, right?
And the film is premised around after Luis was put in jail, suddenly there was no one working and no house where rent was being paid necessarily that
For
she could stay alone.
Yeah.
So she had to move in with Rodrigo. And so while Rodrigo was working the job at the bodega that you see in the film, that's what paid for the house that they all lived in. Yeah,
They were
that's his
renting
house,
it.
So
Yeah.
they're renting
Yeah.
it, but he's the one paying the rent.
Because he has the business.
And so you can really see that to do it, it took a team. It took a team of people who, some were working to make some money, some were working to do cleaning and caretaking. And so it took a whole team to actually take care of someone. And after the story in the film took place, when they moved in with other family, they had to do that because, again, they needed a place that they could actually just stay. And so money and material resources, we do come back to it because it does, I think it would dramatically change the situation for anyone who's working as a caretaker.
If paid 25,000 pesos to get
It was-
brought, how'd that get taken care of?
That's,
Did it get taken care of? Did they pay? Did they have to pay?
yeah, they took care of it.
Yeah.
Oh, they did pay. I just was curious, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was, it wasn't, they didn't have to pay it all at one time or something like that. So it was,
Yeah, I think it took a while.
it took them a while to get it all paid off. Yeah.
But Ro had a pretty good job. I mean, it was a family business that had been around for a while, so they were lucky that he had a pretty decent income, which could cover a house, could cover food for everyone, while Diego and Bruno
Had a car.
mostly stayed and a car, while Diego and Bruno mostly stayed at home and took care of America.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how it all worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just seemed so corrupt, that whole thing of putting him in jail. It just felt like it was totally corrupt.
Yeah, certainly one way to provide support for a family is not to lock up their principal breadwinner and caretaker.
For 9 months without charges,
And
process.
then, require an astonishing amount of money to get them out.
Right.
I think we have time for one last question, if anyone else has
Got a
anything.
question over here?
Oh, done.
Wait.
I know you touched briefly on it. What was the reaction in Mexico to this whole caregivers being put in jail? Was there anything specifically around that and the bribery and the corruptness of the government, and also the misunderstanding of the, I don't want to say burden of the caregiver, but I think people don't realize until you take care of someone with Alzheimer's or a degenerative disease like that, that it takes a toll on the ones that are taking care of them. And so is there any empathy? Is there any change because of this film in Mexico specifically?
Yeah, we have been reaching out to and hosted some screenings in coordination with a variety of experts on aging and caregiving there, in terms of whether the film will, I think there are very few films that change things in ways that are measurable. I think we all hope that we put our hearts into these little things and that they do go out and touch people and change people, and maybe that changes systems in some way. But it's immeasurable, right? And so certainly, no policies have been changed on the behalf of our film yet.
And I'll just add on to that
please.
point that the people who have been working to make those changes have been working for so long and have done so much more than our film is ever going to do. And so we are just lucky that they want in any capacity our film to be one small part of that, for one small minute of that work that they're going to carry on for years and years afterward.
There has been with, I mean, I think that we'll see how these policies roll out. There has been with the new government, the new president in Mexico, some renewed commitments to improving the lives of poor old folk, especially. So there's hope that that will improve some. But again, I think in general, you know, most of the folks we talk to after screenings there have comparable stories. I mean, I think it's unusual for 3 young men to care for an older woman, certainly, but whatever the context. But I think, but most people come up and said, I took care of my grandmother, I took care of my mother, my sister.
Or I'm still taking
care of, and I know exactly what they were going through. And of course, they also know they don't have trust in the state generally, so no one there thinks that like the state was working on behalf of America's interests by throwing Luis in jail for 9 months. Mm-hmm. So I think people are pretty. I think what's unique and maybe surprising about the film are seeing the 3 young men do it. But I think beyond that, when people see the film, they're like, "Yep, this is what it's like."
Think of contacting the National Alzheimer's Association, the American Alzheimer's Association.
We don't have contacts with them. We'd certainly welcome any. You know, I mean, we're our background is filmmaking. You know, we've learned some, and please.
I think that calling them national organizations on and the internet, but I think sending them or contacting them, you get a very wide.
I know that we've partnered with some people here, so I would encourage you all to look at our partners list and see what work people are doing on the ground that we're working with and that the film has been supported by. Chase, Eric, thank you so much for being here and for this beautiful film.
Thank you.
Please tell